Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 12th, and I'm going to call the Finance and Administration Committee to order. Madam Clerk, can we do a roll call, please? Okay. Councillor Lee sent me a note earlier. He's not feeling well, and the late Councillor Leahy is now in the building. So we do have quorum, so we'll move forward. Adoption of the minutes of the meeting of June 13th. Oh, sorry. Any declarations of interest in regards to the agenda today? Being none, the minutes of the June 13th meeting, moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor Garrod. Corrections? Being none, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. We do have, there's no statutory meetings, but we do have two presentations today. One delegation. We're going to start with the presentation, which is with the CAO, the Commissioner, as well as Nicole, the Director of Business and Planning Developments, in regards to the business plans and properties tax supported budget guideline. There's lots of facts and figures in here today, so we're looking forward to the numbers. And I'll create a list of questions as we go through it. Elaine?
Good morning, Finance Chair Ash, Chair Henry, and members of the Finance and Admin Committee. Today, Nancy, Nicole, and I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the proposed guideline for the 2024 budget and the significant contributing factors to this guideline. We understand that it's a difficult time for discussing a tax increase, but the critical nature of the items we will discuss here reflect a continuation of commitments from last year, as well as pressures that continue to evolve for our residents today. These same challenges are being faced by all municipalities with responsibilities for essential services, including social supports. There is much in the press around municipal funding challenges and calls for a review of the provincial, federal, municipal funding and service delivery relationships. And we've addressed this in Report 2023 F21, which is on today's agenda, arising from a motion put forward by Chair Henry several months ago. Next slide. That's great. Thank you. As you have read in the report, the recommended property tax increase cap for 2024 is 9.75%. This represents approximately a $301 annual increase for an average residential property owner for the regional share of the property tax bill. As the region is on average 52% of the tax bill, the 9.75% translates into approximately 5% overall. The guideline before you is recommended at 2.5% for DRPS and 7.5% for the balance of regional services and related agencies. Included in the 7.25 increase for regional services and related agencies is a 0.5% increase relating to Bill 23. We continue to work on clarifying and refining impacts of Bill 23 and related development charges legislation. We will be challenged in 2024, and that will escalate in future years as capital programs advance and DC shortfalls resulting from the required phase-in, freezing, exemptions, and discounts are felt. The phase-in impact are being felt quickly as both the new regional DC bylaw and the transit DC bylaw are subject to the phase-in requirements, which limit DC charges to 80% of the calculated rate, increasing by 5% per year until year 5, when the region can charge the full calculated cost. We've noted in the report that we are now looking at an estimated loss of $881.5 million in non-development charge funding over the next 10 years that will be required to be covered either through property tax or other revenue sources. And this relates to the DC phase-in rates, rate freezing, rental discount provisions, and mandatory exemptions for not-for-profit housing and secondary units based on the provincial growth targets. It is important to note that these preliminary estimates do not include the impact of any exemptions for affordable or attainable housing. This is anticipated to have a very significant impact on the water supply and sanitary sewer user rates, which will be presented to Council in December. The core of the proposed guideline rests on critical service needs directly for paramedic services, transit, police, and housing and homelessness supports. Consideration for cybersecurity, Service Durham or 311, and Works Department priorities are also key to delivering regional services. And in the case of the latter, the Works Department, it is also critical to our ability to achieve the various housing targets that the province has put in place. We will be discussing paramedic services, Durham Region Transit, housing and homelessness, and Durham Regional Police Services in more detail in the dedicated slides. To achieve the recommended guideline, we will continue to draw significantly on reserves and reserve funds, development charges, and any other funding sources that can be determined between now and when we bring the budget forward. And actually beyond that, as we go into 2024, you will be seeing a number of proposals from us with respect to supportive and other housing types, anticipating funding from the provincial and federal partners. Debt will also be strategically employed, resulting in debt payment obligations. Pressure is increasing significantly on the debt side, which will be discussed further in the presentation. With that, I think I turn it over to Nicole. Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you, Elaine. So there are 6 main drivers that are impacting the recommended guideline before you today, and these include first the base pressures. These pressures reflect the increased costs to provide the programs and services that were provided in 2023. Many of these impacts are significantly higher than those that have been experienced historically. More specifically, these include the annualization of 2023 budget decisions and decisions that were approved in year, incremental debt servicing costs for the debt that was approved in 2023, inflationary and contractual pressures, and in particular, capital cost escalations. Together, these pressures total approximately $34.6 million and require a 4.23% increase in the levy in order to accommodate them. The second driver is investments in critical frontline core service areas, including paramedic service, transit, housing, and homelessness supports, which will be addressed in subsequent slides. Additionally, the Works Department is supporting unprecedented projected housing growth requiring critical regional services and is undergoing an assessment of the resources needed to ensure the department is positioned to deliver the infrastructure required to service this growth. It is anticipated that the significant investments will be required in 2024 and over the forecast period to address the recommendations coming from this review. The third driver is the impacts of Bill 23 and the related regulations, which is estimated at $881.5 million over the 10-year forecast period, which Elaine has highlighted. The fourth driver is the strategic investment pressures for DRPS, as well as the region's strategic plan objectives, which Nancy will address in the coming slides. Lastly, there are a number of provincial and federal funding impacts and legislative and regulatory changes that are impacting many of our health and social services programs, police, and conservation authorities that are further described in sections 11 and 12 of the guideline report. The next few slides provide a more detailed overview of the strategic investments that have been provided for within the recommended guideline. The first service area is paramedic services. You'll recall the paramedic service plan was approved by Council in February of this year. For 2024, the recommended gross spending increase is estimated at $11 million. This increase will be funded in part through increased provincial subsidy, property tax, use of reserves and reserve funds, and potentially debt for the new Clarington Paramedic Station. The net result is a projected property tax increase for 2024 of 0.53%, which has been provided for again within this 2024 guideline before you. The approved plan highlights the requirements for continued annual increases in base funding for paramedics over the forecast to address service delivery issues. Highlights for 2024 include 3 new 12-hour paramedic shifts, which is the equivalent of 16 new paramedics, ACP training, additional support, resources, capital improvements, including construction of the new Clarington station. The second strategic investment area is transit. Again, Council approved the long-term investment plan for Durham Region Transit in February 2023. TEC, as well as Council, has endorsed the electrification of DRT fleet and forecasted service plan that increases transit service hours, improving frequency and expanding routes. Similar to paramedics, substantial incremental and sustained financial commitments are required to meet service level goals and achieve climate change objectives through fleet electrification. For 2024, the estimated gross spending increase is estimated at $219.4 million. This increase will be funded in part through increased provincial and federal funding, which is subject to approval, property taxes, use of reserves, reserve funds, and debt financing. The recommended guideline includes an incremental investment of 2% for 2024 on the overall regional levy for transit services, which is consistent with the Transit's approved 10-year strategy. Highlights for 2024 for transit include a 13% increase in service hours, the purchase of approximately 36 electric buses, and facility investments. As highlighted in the 10-year strategy, there's a need for significantly increased investment by the federal and provincial governments in order to fund the significant funding gap and realize the outcomes of the plan. I'll now just turn it over to Nancy to chat about housing and homelessness.
Good morning, members of Finance and Administration Committee. So a few words on a couple of more issues as we really wrestle with such a weighty report that's before you today. Housing and homelessness supports are at the forefront of identified needs in the community, and Council has seen and heard a number of presentations and discussions, both at the Health and Social Services Committee and the Committee of the Whole throughout the year, that highlight the complex housing and homelessness challenges facing our community. Due to the significance of this issue, Council has pre-approved 2 items of significant note that are incorporated into the 2024 budget guideline, including 10 outreach workers and the establishment of a housing redevelopment office. Reports will be forthcoming on a number of additional housing initiatives that the region is currently engaging and consulting with residents and stakeholders on. In response to critical needs, 1635 Dundas has been acquired, and initial operating costs will need to be provided for in the 2024 budget as services begin to phase in at that location based upon ongoing public consultation and engagement. Lastly, final operating costs for the Beaverton Supportive Housing based on the RFP award has been incorporated into the proposed guideline for 2024. From a police perspective, the Durham Region Police Services Chief and the Board have been undertaking their budget processes over the last several months and are moving through their budget approval process this month. The 2024 DRPS budget proposal presented at their July Finance Committee meeting reflects a total 2024 budget pressures of $23.11 million, or about 9.3%. This included DRPS estimates of their base pressures of $15.16 million and new investments for strategic priorities of $7.94 million. This translates to a 2.83% regional levy increase, and as I say, that's based on their public information from their July Finance Board meeting. In order to cover the base pressures and provide for some strategic priorities, staff are recommending a 2.5% regional tax levy increase dedicated to DRPS. This value is somewhat less than what their Finance Committee has approved, and based on that value, they would require a reduction of $2.67 million from that request. Again, we don't know the status of their current submission to their board. How the board determines utilization of the strategic funding would be reported back to committee as part of the 2024 budget deliberations. This presentation, the guideline report, and its attachments highlight the significant financial pressures for paramedics, transit, DRPS, homelessness and housing supports, Bill 23 impacts, as well as inflationary impacts facing all areas of the region. In addition to these pressures, there are many other departments feeling particular pressures that will be outlined in greater detail in the actual budget report planned for February 2024. A very difficult message to communicate is that these pressures are not just requiring a one-year incremental increase with a return to traditional levy increases. We've had quite a bit of discussion over this over the last few months, and Elaine and I have had some conversations around the fact that we have been suggesting for many years that the funding model between the province and federal government and municipalities such as ourselves is needed to be addressed, and it's finally coming all to a critical point, it seems, at the same time. So along with the continued incremental funding that will be tied to paramedics, transit, and DRPS, Council has approved the construction of a 5th regionally operated long-term care home that has an expedited construction timeframe to access enhanced provincial capital funding. The regional incremental operating costs required for this long-term care home is projected to require an overall tax levy increase between 3 to 4% to be phased in over the next 3 years. This includes a greater level of debenture financing due to the significant capital escalation, and that's on tomorrow's Committee of the Whole meeting. And I believe our health partners are going to speak about the same issue that they've been facing. As Elaine has mentioned, the implications for financing shortfalls stemming from Bill 23 are soon to be felt as the capital programs come on stream. Our current modeling is a 3.74% annual increase to address that shortfall each year for the 10 years. As some of you may have noted, at AMO, they did announce some funding for municipalities that have housing targets, but as you know, the upper tier doesn't have those housing targets, so there's nothing that's been announced to our knowledge as yet. And perhaps that's something that we could hope to see some action on between now and budget, but we have nothing that's been announced or indicated in any way. In addition, there will be financial impacts for the opening of a new regional operated childcare center planned for 2024 and 2025, and the implications of an expanded housing portfolio and support to housing providers to accomplish at-home Durham priorities. Updates will be coming to Council on those issues after public consultation. Staff will pursue all opportunities for provincial and federal partnerships to offset as much capital and operating impacts as possible. There will be incredibly enhanced reliance on reserves and reserve funds and debt financing to help offset tax levy increases from as much sources as we can to deal with one-time operating initiatives, phasing things in over multiple years, and significant capital requirements. So while this guideline report represents a 5% overall increase to tax bills, our goal is to allow Council to see this full picture of these issues and try to sort out what kind of prioritization and to have a clear understanding of what these issues really are. As mentioned previously, in order to achieve the 2024 recommended guideline, debenture financing will be needed to be strategically utilized to fund one-time significant capital items where adequate reserve and reserve fund financing is not available. So this slide illustrates the projected debenture requirements based on the 2023 approved capital budgeted 9-year forecast, and that was estimated at $1.2 billion between 2023 and 2032. We've updated the 2023 estimates to reflect the projections for the Seton Long-Term Care Home project on tomorrow's Committee of the Whole agenda, and updates to the Durham Region Local Housing Corporation Deep Energy Retrofit Project, which will be subject to an October Committee of the Whole report. In addition, as mentioned, these debt requirements will increase as a result of Bill 23 and other capital priorities requiring debenture financing, such as our housing and homelessness investments, potentially expanded DRPS capital program, potential implications for the Go East, and transit-oriented development bus rapid transit requirements. So debt servicing costs are projected to increase by approximately $115.1 million over the next 10 years, and that's without those additional items, and that's about a $43 million impact on the tax levy side. We'll leave water and sewer aside for now. Updated debenture financing and projections associated with that, including debt servicing cost, will be presented as part of the 2024 water supply and sanitary sewage budget in December and our property tax budget coming in February. From a reserve fund perspective, last year we budgeted to utilize $237 million. This year we're already at $313 million, an increase of 76, and that does not include the social housing capital, and it does not include draws for Bill 23 if we're trying to find some balance between that 3 3/4 tax levy increase per year and pulling from as many reserve funds as we can to accommodate Bill 23 impacts. So, engaging residents is a significant priority, and this year is going to be very challenging with respect to resident input. We understand and appreciate that greatly. We are hosting our budget town hall. At this point, it's planned for October 12th. Last year, we had a record 14,000 participants on the phone or online through the website. We will accept queries throughout the process and we'll respond. Input received will be considered in the development of the final February 2024 budget recommendations. Affordability is clearly a factor of concern that will be identified by residents. We'll continue as well to try to educate the public on the magnitude of the services that the region provides, as often those are soon to be provided by other levels of government. We'll also continue to educate on the impacts of Bill 23 and how we're trying to address putting forward the 1.5 million homes. So advocacy will also continue on alternative revenue sources, such as noted in the other report on today's agenda that Elaine referred to, that Chair Hendry had requested in January of 2023, F21. I'll turn it over to Elaine to close.
Thank you, Nancy. So just to summarize, the 2024 property tax guideline recommendation proposes a 2024 property tax increase impact cap of 7.25% for regional and external agency services, with a further 2.5% for Durham Regional Police Services. This represents a total of 9.75% increase on the regional portion of property tax bills, which, depending on the municipality, represents approximately 52% of the tax bill. This is roughly equivalent to a 5% increase to the total bill and a $301 annual increase for an average residential property owner. Police, transit, and paramedics alone result in a 5% property tax impact on the regional portion of the bill. This may be greater pending Council's decision with respect to the DRPS guideline, and really the need in these areas certainly reflects the growth in the region and the need to enhance these services. The core of the proposed guideline rests on critical service needs for paramedic services, transit, police, and housing and homelessness supports, along with unavoidable increases for inflation and Bill 23, as you've heard. In order to achieve the proposed guideline and meet the needs of these service areas, as well as address the needs across the organization, we will have to draw significantly on reserves and reserve funds and development charges. Debt will also need to be strategically employed, which will result in additional operating pressures for debt payment obligations. We will continue to leverage any opportunity for provincial and federal funding, and will be actively promoting our pressures through the government relations team in the CAO's office and request committee and council support for these efforts. We also work collaboratively across the GTHA, where many of us are sharing very similar issues and pressures. While this is not the final budget approval, committee can see the challenges being faced with the current funding composition. Staff will make all efforts to address the service demands within the overall final approved guideline. And with that, we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Commissioner. I will invite questions. Just a reminder to committee and to visiting councillors, the questions should be about the delegation and the presentation. We will have an opportunity to debate during the report. So I'll go with the members of the committee first. Mayor Schumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, can you hear me okay? Okay. My one question here, it could be either for the report or the presentation, but it was mentioned during the presentation, and it's mentioned in the report about staff have looked for efficiencies and areas that could be, cut, I guess, for lack of a better word. I'm just wondering, because a lot of the presentation and of course the report speaks to the incremental costs, the additional programs, what's leading to this. Is there anything that you can tell us as to what some of these efficiencies that might have been found so far are, and what you might be looking at additionally?
So through the chair, perhaps I'll start with one example, and then Elaine may comment on some of the work that she's recommending for the organization. So one example that we have looked at is fuel costs. So last year, for example, as you know, that was a huge driver in our budget implications. Fuel costs are always a challenge to predict what's going to happen. We're hoping for a little bit more stability, so we have reduced the cost of fuel, the projected cost throughout all the departments, and that is providing us with an offset savings. So that's a sort of an easier example. The rest we are working through. As mentioned, this isn't the guideline. This is the guideline, not the budget. So what we will do then is each division and department will be assigned a goal, and they will have to come into that. So that's the next stage of this process. But we have done that preliminary look in some of the very obvious things, and as I say, fuel is one of them. However, I would like to pass to our CAO. She mentioned a Works Department study, and perhaps may want to comment more.
CEO?
Yep, thanks, Nancy. First of all, I think it's important to know that every year we do a detailed line-by-line review, and that is ongoing with respect to identifying areas where we traditionally underspend and overspend and adjusting appropriately. We are in the process of undertaking a review of the Works Department to ensure that we are focusing on core services and that the department is properly resourced to manage the growth that is before it. To be perfectly honest, I do expect that the review will result in some restructuring. It may result in more efficient processes, but I cannot see it resulting in significant changes, because the one thing that we have discovered that actually led to me launching this review is how understaffed and under-resourced that department was to deal with the growth in infrastructure resulting from the population growth. Another thing that council could consider, and we're happy to consider, is doing a formal core service review. It's certainly something we could think about for next year. There's no question there's always benefits from doing that detailed review across the corporation. We're open to that, but that is where we're standing right now.
Thank you. Mayor Schumer, supplemental questions?
Thank you, and I'm happy to hear that the idea of a core services review is being looked at, because we are doing one in Brock, and I think it might be well timed to do it at the regional level. The other question I guess I had at this point, you've got in the presentation and in the report a half-point increase in the levy due to Bill 23. Has there been any, what is happening so far in this process, and I speak to the budget process, about the issue of a lot of the planning responsibilities going to the lower tiers? What's happening with respect to how the region is forecasting its planning activities or lack thereof?
CEO?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, that legislation has not come into effect yet. We're awaiting regulations, and we are not clear on the timing. We have been told at some point in 2024. The planning department has looked thoroughly at what role it provides versus the local level, and has worked in partnership with our local planning officials to realign services as needed. There has been a reduction in staff, despite the fact that it's status quo right now, just through attrition, hearing the news that the planning authorities were going to largely devolve to the local level. Again, our planning department is very small. I think the total annual budget is $12 million, if I'm correct, Nancy. So I don't anticipate material savings there, but they are looking at realignment. They're also looking at how to support our northern municipalities, perhaps through service agreements where the planning capacity has traditionally rested with the region. So all of that is a work in progress, awaiting the regulations so that we have a better understanding of what's in store for us.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll guess save it the rest when we have the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Leahy?
Thank you, Chair Ash. So appreciate that. So yeah, no, I've really challenges supporting such a high number. My questions are around number of things. So the first one is that, so if we have, it's a 9.75% increase on the tax and 2.2% assessment growth, so we're looking at a minimum 12% increase in the budget year over year. Is that fair?
So this budget that you see before you certainly is the 975 and a 2.2 for assessment growth. I am hopeful that that assessment growth number, although it's not necessarily practical of me to be hopeful, but hopeful that that would be greater because then that could reduce the 975. Going forward, if that's what your question is, we'll be challenged next year with, again, the police request. They are under a lot of significant pressures, as they will speak to. We have the transit, we have the paramedics, we will have the Seton long-term care home phasing in at 3 to 4%. We'll try to do that over multi-years and offset with reserve fund financing in the interim to phase it on. And we will have Bill 23 with that at this point, without any further assistance or change to how it's structured, we're looking at 3.25 a year for the 10 years.
Yeah, so that, yeah, understanding that there's no other structure. But the 0.5, so I guess the 0.5 we already put in last year, so that 3.5 million just goes into reserves? And that's where this will go until we know?
So the 0.5 through the chair, the 0.5 that you put in 2023 is paying for, we're in the midst of recruiting. There are additional staff that are required to accommodate Bill 23. So that is the operating side, and that was mentioned in the report last year that we can't just have a road and a water plant arrive, right? We have to have all the planning and all of the work involved from a capital program perspective. So that's a challenge for that 0.25% from last year. The 0.5% for 2024, I'll say, is almost a placeholder in the sense that I know it's going to be significantly more than that, and I need a footprint. So it would go towards the capital program that we're going to see escalating. In the normal course of things, and you would know this as well from a local perspective, if you're faced with these kinds of pressures, you would put off capital. But that's the exact thing that we can't do. The locals can't meet their housing targets if we don't provide the regional services that go with it. So that's going to require funding to deal with that shortfall. The 0.5% is kind of a drop in the bucket, but I wanted to make it clear here at this committee that it requires a footprint, and we will keep trying between now and when the budget strikes before you to figure out how we can phase in the impact, or hopefully see some change in how it's worked. It was great news for the locals that there was some relief announced at AMO. That being said, my understanding is, I haven't asked each of the local treasurers, but my impression is that they are still going to be significantly pressured at the local level as well, even with the additional funding. I'm not clear on how much each local is going to get from that funding.
Yeah, no, there's no question that there's impact there. Like, do we have a sense with so if that's, 12% increase the budget, so around like 84 million or in change, like how much staff that we're planning to hire out of this budget increase?
So this budget increase, the staffing would be, so the 2% for transit, for example, would be dealing with transit operators to drive the new buses. I don't have a list of new staff because we literally that's going to be a very tough call for anyone. It will be things like the outreach workers and staff that are required in social services to actually deliver those frontline services. We haven't done a completed review of all of those items, other than to say that we will be keeping it as limited as possible and be very focused on the front line. Police, there's 2.5. That's what their July report said. 76. I'm not sure what they're presenting to their board. I believe it's next week or the week after. So that's probably a fair representation, perhaps, of what they're looking at. So.
Yeah, no, because I look at, for the last 5 years, we hired between 200 to 300 a year, and this is almost double or more the increase. So I'd imagine there's a lot more staff than that.
I wouldn't necessarily make that extrapolation. I think we're going to be very hard pressed to deal with some of the service delivery scenarios, which may or may not be. So social services, for example, it's not always frontline staff. They often have contracted service delivery for some of the social services programs. So there's it is a basket of different ways of trying to deliver the service. And
Yeah.
capital will be a big piece as well.
No, and then, fair enough. So I guess, as you mentioned in the presentation, was around, that we're pulling about 313 million from reserves this year. We still have just under 2 billion in reserves. Can we not reallocate more from reserves now, as in the high interest rate environment, and borrow more later? Because that's part of the criticisms we receive from the
Yes.
province, that we have too much in reserves.
And if I may, we're actually going to have to do both. So that 313 is our first blush through for this guideline. We are going to have to be looking at it way more significantly this year and next year. And as noted, the reason why I added a debt slide to this presentation was to show you that also is increasing dramatically. So the example I'll give you is Bill 23. Clearly, how can I come to you on top of everything else and say now we need 3.75 for Bill 23? I'm going to have to say we're going to have to pull a significant amount of reserve funds to try to fund a share of Bill 23 and balance it with that tax levy increase. And those are very imminent decisions. So that is a factor. So we are going to have to use both. There's unquestionably both issues will be, same with the social housing, looking at developing our housing portfolio. We cannot do it on all debt because that will be, again, a huge tax levy increase. So that is going to have to be a significant draw on reserve funds. And the other piece that we're looking at, I mentioned the Seton long-term care, phasing in the operating costs. We're going to try to see where else we can do that. So even though you can't have a third of the staff running the long-term care home, we'll phase it in a third, and a third, or something like that, and fund the rest from reserve funds until we get the full cost on. And we'll be looking to see whether we can do that even in smaller ways, such as, the cyber and that sort of thing. So we're going to try very hard to see where we can extract even more than the 313 million. But it's going to have to be both more debt as well as more reserve fund.
And then my next piece is, again, about all those plans, the most significant being in the housing plan and the DRT plan. Can we not, again, things change, can we not revisit those plans? Because that's where the bulk of this, $80 million increase is going in.
So I'll respond, and the CIO may wish to. We are at the will of council. We bring to you a lot of very challenging issues, and this committee is at the forefront of a challenging issue this year. Those are the prioritizations that we need to understand from this committee to try to figure out what steps to move forward. So
Yeah,
through
sure.
the chair to the.
Just to add also, when you look at things like DRT, we're trying to grow a service that will serve the new residents that we're anticipating over the next 10 years. And that requires a material investment unless we want to continue to build car-focused communities. There's also a need to upgrade and electrify the fleet. So I think it would be quite a risk to delay that. With the Go East extension coming, we have a tremendous opportunity to ensure that our transit system links up with the Go East to make a much more integrated community. With respect to the housing, we're facing challenges that most of the GTHA and beyond are facing, with a dramatic increase in homelessness, mental health, and addiction issues. And as service system managers, we are required to work with the province and federal governments to ensure that we're providing the services that we can to address those issues.
And I certainly appreciate that, but there's also cost of living, like 10% increase is significant, like another $300 for the average house. Trying to afford their water bill increases, they're paying for grocery increases, like there's so many impacts.
Counselor, I think
Anyway,
that's more debate than question.
fair enough, sorry.
Very good points, though.
Anyways, so we'll keep to the good points. So I'll leave that for now. I'll wait for the report. Thank you.
Chair Henry.
Thank you, Chair Ash. Just a couple quick questions. First question would be, within our budget, there are a number of things that we're paying for, and we should pay for to support our communities, but we're not getting the funds back from the other levels of government. Have we received any money related to supporting our allies, those people who have left Afghanistan and Ukraine to come to Durham Region?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. No, at this point, we have not. We are in the process of applying to the federal government to be reimbursed for some of the costs we've incurred in dealing with the recent asylum seekers crisis, but to date, we have not received any revenues.
Thank you, Elaine. Next question, and I know that Councillor Wu's here, and he's on the Police Services Board, but do we know what the cost implications of judicial decisions that put people out back into our community under police supervision costs the actual DRPS? Like I'm saying, people that have been released under mandatory supervision where a police officer has to knock on their door to make sure they're complying, that's not a responsibility of a municipality, that's a judicial decision. Do we have any idea what the cost would be for that?
So through the chair, and Councillor Wu may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have a cost, but I recall in the presentation that there were as many people in the community that the police needed to keep tabs on as there are uniformed approved officers or more. So I don't have a cost for you, but certainly I was quite surprised by the sheer number of people that they're required to monitor. I'm not sure if Councillor Wu would have anything more specific.
Hit the request button.
Sorry about that. No, and it's funny, I was just listening, I'm just going to sort of segue off. It was brought to the attention with we're talking about core service reviews and whatnot, and what we see from the Durham Regional Police, when you look at where we've been, let's say, stagnant. And I think that would go for a lot of departments where we've been stagnant, but as the region grows, getting back to your point, can I say and to the great city of Pickering and Ajax, we are becoming the Scarborough East. And that requires dedicated personnel. And again, the migration of that, no offense to Scarborough, but yes, I could probably say the amount of offers that we have, and that's focusing on that element. Yes, we're getting behind the 8 ball.
If I might, Chair Henry, I met with the chief on Friday in my office, and I asked the very same question about offender management, and he cited the same stat that the commissioner just did, that there are more people that require offender management in Durham than there are uniformed police officers, and that number is almost 1,000 now, so it tells you the number. Further questions, sir?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely supporting the people that are on the street that need our help. Durham is a caring, compassionate community. But the responsibilities that we have taken on, what additional funding have we received from the federal government on the challenges related to homelessness? So, Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, we're spending $100 million this year between asylum seekers, our allies, Ukrainians in the Afghani community, and then on mental health and homelessness, that we didn't spend 5 years ago. Do we receive, I know we receive about $17 million a year annually from the province, but do we receive any other funds?
So through the chair, I can't speak to how much is dedicated to that issue. It is embedded in a lot of our services that we're providing, whether it be paramedics, whether it be social services. So there's a lot there. We do receive the 16 million, I think it is 16 or 17 million that you quoted. I think we're anticipating maybe another 5 million added to that in 2024. But beyond that, Elaine may speak because she's been doing a lot of advocacy work to try to enhance those numbers.
I think the one thing I would point out with respect to asylum seekers, refugees, and the vulnerable populations are resident in Durham. If they have, with refugees and asylum seekers with status, they are generally eligible for Ontario Works, which is cost shared with the province, so that there is a contribution there. And then the two orders of government have invested on various housing initiatives over time. Beaverton being the one that comes to mind immediately, but they've also invested dollars through the region that we were able to give to our not-for-profit service providers for housing and other services.
Chair, one final question, and this one is a fairly large question. It may require more work than available right here, but would it be possible for our staff to account for all the things that we do that were never designed to be put onto the property taxpayer?
So, if I may, that is a big question. I think part of that would perhaps drive from a service delivery review that Elaine was mentioning as something that's feasible. I think certainly we could look big picture to see what services, but we are the service system manager for a number of areas that are big picture words from an envelope perspective. So there's that potential of arguing what are the lines in the sand around the definition of what should be covered under that being a service system manager. So that's where you get sort of the challenge of, well, you're responsible for that, but how far are you responsible for that, and how much, globally and provincially and federally are we responsible for on a property tax base? There has been a lot of dialogue, as you know, because you generated us to do the research on the report, the companion report that's here today. There is a huge groundswell of debate amongst all upper tiers that are in our situation. And trust me, we're not alone. Waterloo has publicly announced that they're at 10 at this point. And I think there's another big one that's announced that they're at 9, and that doesn't include any Bill 23. So we're not alone, and I think it's driving much greater pressure to have this dialogue around either how should things be funded or who should be doing the work. Either way, it can't remain escalating the way it is year after year on a property tax base, because as all of you know, property taxes have nothing to do with ability to pay. Income taxes and sales taxes, sales taxes have been going up as a revenue stream for other levels of government, because if something costs more, the tax that ride on top of it as a percentage generates additional revenue. And income taxes, of course, are based on ability to pay, based on legislative definitions of that. So there is a very great mismatch between services funded or services provided on a property tax base versus what should be driven on an income-based or ability to pay base. And this is just a year where that has escalated to the point where it's very obvious. I'm not sure if Elaine, if you wish to add to that.
That was great. I was just going to add also, this is one of the symptoms of being creatures of the province. I think what we're talking about is really going back and looking at all the legislative changes that have happened probably in the last 30 years that have increasingly pushed down more responsibilities onto municipal governments. So that is definitely a challenge. And now we're seeing the same from the federal government, who are claiming that, asylum seekers and refugees are also municipal issues. So we could look at the legislative changes and what the impacts on that have been with respect to our responsibilities.
So, Chair, sorry, I said that was my last question. I have a follow-up then.
Go ahead.
So to Nancy, Elaine, and to you, Chair. At Marco, this has become a conversation of affordability. Are the treasurers, the CAOs, and the mayors of the big city group actually talking about what we are funding that really isn't our responsibility, but we do it because we're a caring, kind, and compassionate community?
So through the chair, I will say, I'll reference your last comment first. I think one of the challenges that this council has, and perhaps one's in a similar boat, is that councillors are very sympathetic to the community and trying to save and solve the problem. And you are very front line in that because people come to you. So that certainly is a huge challenge at this particular level of government. In response to your question, though, some of you may be aware that the City of Toronto has passed a resolution wanting to have a dialogue on a municipal funding review. And one of their secondary resolutions is that they want to have the various groups that you just mentioned lobby and advocate for that as well. So that is being, I'm assuming the City of Toronto resolution will go to the big city mayors and the mayors and chairs, and that's what I understand to be. It's not been ratified by City of Toronto Council perhaps as yet, but it certainly was what was passed through their budget discussions.
I could just add that the regional and single-tier CAOs absolutely discuss this. We meet in the, as a GTHA group where we're very much engaged with the City of Toronto's strategy and how it could impact for better or for worse surrounding regions. In addition, at the end of this month, there is an annual meeting with all of the CAOs and city managers with deputy ministers from the province. And this year, the financial sustainability of municipal government is one of the key agenda items.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford, you were first on my list, but under our rules, the committee members are first, so I do still have you on my list. Next questioner of the presentation is Councillor Grott from the beautiful municipality of Uxbridge.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And it's just a single question related to the reserves. We have a report on tomorrow's agenda about the size of the reserves and how they're invested and so on. Sometimes I get the idea that there's an understanding that perhaps there are rainy day funds and being set aside for rainy days such as we're facing now, where in fact, I believe that most of those funds are allocated to projects that are coming down the pipe, some associated with growth and some that are already planned before we saw the phenomenal growth. I'll probably bring this up again, Chair, during our discussion about the report, but you have made mention, Commissioner, already about dipping into those reserves to help mitigate the effect of this increase. Can you give me a couple of examples, please, of projects that would be affected? Once that money's, as you and I talked offline, once it's spent, projects that would no longer be able to go forward because we're using them as part of this discussion today.
So we did have a quick discussion there, and Mayor Ashton and I spoke yesterday with respect to reserves and reserve funds as well. Our use of reserves and reserve funds is very, very active. So they are not something that sits unutilized. And you can see, as I mentioned, we're at least a $76 million increase over last year, even at this early stage of the process. And we are looking at much more significant use of those. One of the things that's different perhaps in how we utilize them from how the local budgets work is that we try to utilize them throughout the process so that when it comes to you, we've already drawn on them in a significant way. So we don't say, let's use the rate stabilization to solve this problem. We now call that the Operating Impact Reserve Fund, but we actually embed that into our budgets and identify it up front everywhere we can. So, a simple example of that is Durham One Net. So all the broadband service delivery, rather than that go on the tax base, we are hopeful that it will become self-sustaining at some point. In the meantime, we are funding 100% of the operating and capital through the reserve funds so that we don't do a tax levy increase now for something that hopefully will be self-sustaining down the road. So that's kind of a quick and easy example of where we do that. The example of the long-term care is another one of where we do that, where we will phase it in on the tax base over multiple years, but we will be putting the costs on when the facility needs it. Other examples are things like cyber. We've had a huge cyber program for the last couple of years. We are using reserve funds for everything that is a one-time or an investment in an infrastructure in the sense of software or studies to get us to where we need to be. Staffing, of course, that need to permanently be, I'll say, policing the cyber issue, would be on the tax base. Another is my Durham 311, Service Durham. We have front-ended as much as we possibly can of the creation of that program. All of the infrastructure requirements, all of that has been done through reserve funds and will continue to do so. The ongoing staffing requirements, of course, fall onto the tax base. So everywhere that we can identify something that needs upfront initiative, we try to do that through reserve funds, and then the permanent ongoing costs fall onto the tax levy side. On the capital, of course, our capital program, we updated it significantly last year to put in a 10-year, and in last year's budget documents, you could see the usage of the reserve funds very dramatically for our capital program. That is only going to be worse, as I say, this year with respect to having to advance projects for the Bill 23 issues. So we're going to be seeing even more of that.
That's it for now, Mr. Chair. I'll probably dive a little bit deeper during the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McDougall.
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report, for the presentation. A question I have is related to, there was talk about costs in terms of works. I think it's related to Bill 23 and the growth that's required or been, allocated to us in terms of you must take this. So are we looking to existing taxpayers, existing ratepayers to pay for the infrastructure required for this growth?
So through the chair, as it sits now for Bill 23, we are going to have to look to existing taxpayers, reserve funds, and/or debt, depending on the projects. So absolutely yes at this point, because there are no other identified resources being diverted to the region.
So the idea of growth pays for growth is not anywhere near what we're looking at.
We have escalated in a multitude factor in the wrong direction from that perspective. As I think Nicole mentioned it in her slides, we are at 881 million is our projected Bill 23 shortfall for the next 10 years.
And then, so in terms of your statement, we are at the will of council, I think it was stated.
Yes.
Is this the terms of growth that we're looking at, is this a decision of council to look for this amount of growth?
So through the chair, you're quite correct. I say as staff, we're at the will of council. Council, of course, we've been directed by the province through legislation, and our CAO mentioned, we are often referred to as creatures of the province. So we have to comply with provincial legislation, which dictates all of these funding impacts.
So the amount of growth we're experiencing is the province's responsibility, I'm assuming.
I would say it's their objective, right? They've given targets to every local. That the 1.5 million homes is the province's objective.
Okay. So it's the lower tier municipalities' responsibility, the municipal level's responsibility to support the growth and immigration targets of the province and the federal government. So it's our responsibility as local taxpayers to pay for that.
Maybe I'll just jump in. That is how it's evolving right now, but it's nowhere in writing that should be our local responsibility. I think the growth in Durham can be split into two categories. One, natural growth, because it's a very desirable region, and that would happen anyway. And the second is the provincial housing targets and the immigration targets. And that is where a new funding framework is needed with the provincial and federal governments.
Sorry, I'm just thinking in terms of natural growth with Canadian birth rates at 1.4%, well underneath natural reproduction rates. So it's certainly not completely natural growth. On a different question, when we look at, we're greening up the fleet for the buses, which is awesome. There's carbon taxes that are applied to things that we purchase. Are we receiving the funds for greening our fleets up through those carbon taxes? Can we say we're getting those funds in municipally and we're allocating that to this?
So what we receive, and I may call on Bill, what we receive right now is provincial gas tax funds, and they are, I'll say, a little bit questionable from a long-term perspective because, of course, if we electrify provincially and federally, then the amount of proceeds from gas tax sales should naturally decline. So there is that issue of what would the end result commitment be to replace that funding. So we do receive provincial gas tax. And the other piece, and Nicole mentioned this in the long-term plan for transit last year, and Bill is probably more aware of the details on this, the federal government has announced a transit program, I think to commence in 2026. One of the things that we don't have is any commitment of what that exactly is and how we would be eligible and what it would fund. So if I may, see whether Bill has any more information, any dialogue around that, but my last information is that 2026 is when that program is supposed to occur. Whether the federal government's funding it from those taxes, I'm not sure. So I will defer to General Manager Holmes.
Mr. Holmes?
Thank you, through the chair. I hope this responds to your question, Councillor. We are looking at opportunities of emission credits, et cetera, moving forward. We're just delving into that now, so we're just reviewing what that might look like. Don't have an answer for you on that. We are awaiting currently decisions on the Zero Emission Transit Fund, approval of various projects that are in the hopper for us in terms of buses and facility. And as the commissioner highlighted, there is the permanent transit fund, which will be coming into effect in 26, 27. The federal government are just now releasing details of the program in terms of how it will work. And we'll be able to provide more details there later on in terms of allocations or project-based funding. But they're just now starting to talk about what that program will look like as the ISIP program wraps up in 26.
Very good. That's all for now. Thank you.
Councillor Crawford?
Well, this has been a very good morning Tuesday, hasn't it? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope my questions are in the right place, and if not, I'm sure you'll let me know. The funding, we lost or had to give back funding from transit at the beginning of the announcement of Bill 23, did we not?
So I'm not sure if I'm making the same parallel. So our transit development charge bylaw had already been approved,
Right.
but that legislation was retroactive. So then we had to go back and reduce our transit development charge under that legislation. Perhaps that's what you're referring to.
I think maybe that's it. How much was that?
Well, they had to drop to 85. Immediately upon, I think it was November, they had to drop to 80, and then July 1st, we managed to get up to 85% of the charge.
Okay. The police ask, what was the percentage they originally asked for? Was it the 8.26?
No, it was 9 point,
Oh.
and our recommendation from regional staff at the 2.5 global is the 8 that you're referencing.
Oh, okay, so that's, and then, but they had initially asked for 9.
9.2, I'm
Okay.
rounding there.
Okay, sorry, I was a bit confused with all the percentages. I just know that I went on a drive along just not long ago and had the interesting experience of watching an arrest and watching it right through to the jail time. And it took 3 police officers to deal with 2 individuals. And then once they got back with the drugs, they needed an additional 2 officers to get rid of the drugs to make sure that the initial officer would be okay. The amount of man time it takes to deal with our current situation is unbelievable. I know in our municipality alone, we rely heavily on our police to help us with our situations. Like, we have no other choice. And so I can't,
Is there a would you
okay,
agree
never mind.
question in there?
so, yeah, never mind. I'm just talking. Anyway, the bill for the asylum seeker, sorry, Chair, have we actually submitted it?
I will have to get back to you on that. I know it was imminent, so if you allow, I'll check with social services and let you know.
Because if that's the case and we've already submitted it or we're close to it, I think every one of our municipalities need to be sending letters to our MPs because we not only should get some of it, we should get all of it that we spent. We didn't ask for it and we got it and we had to deal with it. And I know because it affected my municipality directly. And if you need help with that, I think every municipality should be sending letters to their MP. Anyway, that's I don't know if I was in the right place or not for this, but that's
You
it.
made some valuable comments. I appreciate that. Councillor Wu, you had questions?
Yeah, and through the chair, and thank you, and for some of the comments made by my fellow councillors, and certainly Councillor Crawford. On that one, and in the report, well, I guess I'm not supposed to. I'll ask this question then. A lot have been said about, let's say, how we're trying to help with homelessness. We certainly are, and with 1635 Dundas Street. And we are a compassionate community, we're a compassionate region. And this natural growth, this housing pledge that we all agreed to as municipalities, the target that the province has. But in our community, we have, and I guess there's no way to quantify these encampments that are setting up. And again, that becomes an issue with Durham Regional Police, certainly our hospital system, our social services system, and trying to, again, quantify homelessness. Those that are registered, would you happen to have an idea how many that are known? And that's probably undercounted for the number that are out there.
So if I may, I'll have our CAO speak to this.
I believe that in terms of homelessness in the region, there are 300+ people that we are aware of which about 152 are chronically homeless. That is probably the thin edge of things, but those are, through our by name list and the outreach work that's done, that's the order of magnitude that we're dealing with.
So through the chair, and again, I appreciate from the CAO, so I guess that's reflective what we'll see certainly in the social services budget. And again, when I look at the social services budget, we're probably very much underfunded. And again, we seem to be if I can use the term, the funder of last resort. You know, there's a lot of said about whether it be immigration or aside from that, asylum seekers, homelessness for whatever reason. Yeah, and again, I think Chair Henry has mentioned, and we're in a crisis situation with homelessness. And from yourself, with the regional chair, Chair Henry, getting together with the other chair, is anybody listening?
He put his mic on. Oh, they're here.
I think, Councillor Wu, the term listening is very interesting. They're listening, but they're not hearing us. Now, we were very lucky. We recently had a meeting with Peter Baffenfalvy, where he actually, in one of his media conferences, talked about the challenges that we were having. So he heard us. And, you know, I was happy that it was mentioned in his press conference, but at the federal level, we're not being heard at all. And I don't believe any community is. When the chairs and the mayors group gets together, this is a topic of conversation. What we're funding off the municipal tax rate are things that we shouldn't be funding. Yet we have to, because we have no choice. We are the last destination for people in need. And, you know, we recently sent a letter to the 3 leaders. It was expressing the challenges we're having, asking to declare homelessness a national crisis, and asking for them to come to Durham Region, as Durham is a microcosm of all other municipalities across this country. Haven't heard back from anybody yet. Well, that's not true. We did hear back from one MP, because we sent it to our MPs and our MPPs as well, who's willing to pull some people together to have the conversation. But can I rant for a minute, if you'll allow me?
Sure.
The challenge is not about a conversation, it's about action, and nothing's happening. And that the business of homelessness, you know, the need of homelessness is there, and Durham is doing an amazing job. And for all our frontline service people that work within the organization, I have to say thank you. But the business of homelessness, the cost of homelessness, and nobody wants to sit down and have the conversation of we're spending all of this money this way. And if we were to address this problem, and I often talk about broadband and homelessness in reference back when this country came together 158 years ago, that we were able to build a railroad across this country with no technology, nothing other than a level and a piece of string and a pair of eyeglasses to see where you were going, and we could do it in 5 years. Now that takes a country that had a vision and understanding that the railroad to connect our communities is equivalent to what we're trying to do with broadband today, which is also underfunded. But if we were to put that same effort into declaring homelessness a crisis and bringing all the people together at the kitchen table to have the conversation about the challenges, because if we don't fix it, we will never be able to afford it. And you can see now in our budget that we cannot afford homelessness. Yet we're doing what we can as a caring community to make sure that the people in need get that help. Are they hearing us in Ottawa to say, here's some money to help you? Are they listening to us when, the police departments and politicians are saying you need to change the rules around how we manage homelessness, the challenges around drugs? And, we know what communities around the world have had problems where they have not solved it. And I think through our CAO, you're about to get 2 books very shortly that talk about the challenges of what's gone on in other parts of the world. Long answer, they're not hearing us. They're not hearing anybody. They're not funding what their commitment is. And it breaks my heart that we are forced as property tax owners to pick up costs that we have no control over. You can't fix the problems related to policing if you don't deal with the problems, which are the people that sell the drugs. I'm a very simple person in thought process, but the amount of money that we're spending on the business of homelessness, if it was directed back into our communities, would be unbelievable what we could do. It's dollars that are used today or dollars that are lost. Long rant. I said what I should say. I didn't say how I feel, Chair. Because if I said what I felt, you would evict me from this chair.
That language would be unparliamentary.
You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you. Will, you had a follow-up question?
No, I just wanted to thank Chair Henry for his rant and to just mention my forefathers built the railroad. Thank you.
Councillor McDougall, final question before we move on.
I do, thank you. Just, we talked about the future and future years being, very tough and probably looking very similar. So with a potential tax increase of 10% this year, will we be looking towards that for, the next 7 years, essentially doubling our property taxes from a regional perspective from here to 7 years out?
If we can't find other solutions and have the things that addressed that is being raised through the CAO and through the chair, then that is the reality of what we're staring at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nicole, as well as Elaine, for this presentation today. I'm sure we'll get into further discussions during the report, and that we'll deal with it then. We do have one delegation today, and that's Mark Murphy from Lakeridge Health. And it's in regards to the Lakeridge Health Bowmanville redevelopment and its inclusion in the budget guideline. Mark, welcome to our chamber. You have 5 minutes, and your time starts now. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Ash, and thank you, committee members and staff. With me today is Frank Cheridano, the CEO of the Bowmanville Health Foundation. On the line is Kirk Kemp, who's the chair of the We Care, We Can campaign. Nancy Shaw, Senior Director of Government Relations at Lakeridge Health, and Carrie Anzarati, the Manager of Project Delivery. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you. Just press, right? Okay. In December of 2020, the Regional Council approved an allocation up to $37.5 million in local share from its Community Investment Grant Program in support of the Bowmanville Hospital redevelopment. That was premised on a total project cost of approximately $500 million in 2020. Over the course of the last 30 months, further refinements and development of detailed plans with Lakeridge Health team members and the Ministry of Health have progressed significantly. The Ministry and Infrastructure Ontario are targeting a fall 2025 construction start and a 2.5-year estimated construction duration for the Bowmanville Hospital redevelopment. Improvements to aging and insufficient Lakeridge Health hospitals across the Durham region is a high priority to support growth in aging. Routinely, Lakeridge Health operates at over 105% capacity. This pressure will continue with the projected growth. A commitment to critical infrastructure spending from the region of Durham is critical to providing essential health care to our communities. The Bowmanville Hospital redevelopment will result in enhanced healthcare accessibility for the residents of Durham region, including advanced medical technologies, upgraded facilities, and expanded services. The opening day of 2028 capacity of 136 inpatient beds is an increase of almost 30% from today's capacity. Design capacity for 2040 is 178 beds that is projected to meet the acute care demand by 2040 and onwards. We will also be developing a new on-site hemodialysis service to service the Clarington community, as well as ambulatory care clinics. Final design and refinements negotiated with the Ministry and confirmation of the planned fall 25 construction start dates with the province have resulted in clearer and more precise cost estimates. The redevelopment will stimulate economic growth and create jobs within the region, including construction activities that will generate additional employment opportunities, support local businesses, and contribute to the overall economic prosperity of Durham region. When operational in 2028, an estimated 275 additional employees will be working at the Bowmanville Hospital, and a modern, well-equipped hospital is essential to attracting and retaining skilled healthcare professionals. Construction cost escalation, as we've heard from previous presentations, has occurred, and the total cost is materially higher than forecasted in 2020. However, I must note that the scope of the redevelopment is materially the same as what we've projected in 2020 planning estimates, including the overall square footage, the program scale, and the programs and services within the hospital site. Our ask for the Bowmanville Hospital. The estimated total project costs are now forecasted and escalated to 25 construction start time to be $736 million based on Ministry of Health and Infrastructure Ontario forecasting models. This translates to a ministry-mandated local share requirement of $110.4 million, approximately 15%. The We Care, We Can campaign is focused on this objective and has engaged deeply with the community with this local share goal. We are seeking continued regional council support for local share contribution of 7.5% of project costs. This amounts to an additional $17.7 million. While a commitment is necessary in the short term, funding outflow can be deferred until fall/winter of 2027, which is about the timelines expected for substantial completion of the Bowmanville Hospital. Concluding context. Healthcare and making our hospitals in Ontario is keeping our hospitals strong in Ontario is a main priority for all Ontarians, more specifically for the residents of Durham region. With the new hospital estimated to be a decade away, we have an opportunity now to complete an extremely important healthcare project that will benefit all the residents of Durham region. The redevelopment of the Bowmanville Hospital is on track for a fall 25 construction start date, and site diligence work is underway. We have the financial support commitments in place from the province and increased funding under strong consideration from the municipality of Clarington. The region's continued commitment to this critical healthcare project at the 7.5% level of project costs will make this project a reality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you coming today and the good work that the foundation does and the importance of having healthcare close to home. Questions? Councillor Wu.
Yeah, and through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Murphy, for stepping forward and this presentation. Now, I don't know if you have the history. When was the last time, I guess it would have been called Bowmanville Memorial Hospital, but Lake Ridge Health Bowmanville, when was the last time that there was a redevelopment there? Would you?
Yeah, other than some work that we did to upgrade the eye center in it's late 20, or early 2020. The last major addition to Bowmanville was done in the early 90s. And prior to that, it was done in the mid-60s, with the original build being in the 1950s.
And you wouldn't happen to hazard a population at that time of maybe Bowmanville?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll have to get back to you on that, Councilor. Okay. Sorry, through you, Chair.
Now, were you aware of the housing pledge by the municipality of Clarington of 13,000 homes by 2031? That adds on to the growth of not only Bowmanville, Clarington, and this is a regional, if you want to call it, services the region. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, the Bowmanville Hospital is part of a system of hospitals at Lake Ridge Health, so it is a regional component of an overall health system, yes.
And I don't want to use the term premature. When the first request at that time, and certainly not knowing that cost would escalate, that was about 500 million you had in your slide deck?
Through you, Chair Ash, yes, that is correct. In 2020, that was the estimate we developed with the Ministry of Health.
Okay. Now the cost has escalated. So if you came back and you made that presentation now, basically it would be what the government, or I shouldn't say government, regional council, it'd be 736 million. So basically you're just looking for that gap in the funding.
Through your Chair, yes, that's exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wu. Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Chair Ash. So through you again, thank you for coming out this evening. Now, I know you mentioned in the presentation that you would be okay with that extra 17.5 million to receive that in 2027. So we're going to ask staff. I guess my question is, well, as you can see, all the funding pressure, could we take longer to pay that? Like, I guess that is that, or is that your absolute drop dead date that you would have to have that 17 million in it? Because again, we're under a lot of cost pressures as well.
Through your Chair Ash. I think what we're looking for is a commitment from the region to support us. 2027 as the projected substantial completion date is when the check would have to be provided to the province. However, a commitment from the region of Durham is certainly solid enough to take to the bank to do any bridge financing that we might require.
Okay, so no, that's helpful as a way as to have that option, and we'll ask staff. So again, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
There's no further questions. Thank you, Mark, for being here today. As you know, there is a recommendation for inclusion in the budget for this additional ask, and you certainly have a strong advocate in Councillor Wu and Mayor Foster and Councillor Anderson for a continued commitment to the Bowmanville Hospital as part of the Lake Ridge. So thank you for being here today.
Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just perhaps we can take a 10-minute recess before we get into the reports. Comfort break, moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor McDougall. Then we recess till 11 o'clock. Good. Oh, okay. No, no, the only one missing is Ian. Just to, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Just for clarity, I misspoke with our last delegate. The current budget does not have the increase ask. It only has the original ask. I know Councillor Wu might be bringing an amendment to deal with that, which may in fact change one of the operative clauses in regards to the moratorium on extending it. So I just want to correct the record because I was confusing Uxbridge, who's getting all the money, to Bowmanville, who's getting none, so. Yeah, I know. So, let's go through the agenda, and I imagine we'll be spending some time on the budget guideline. But first, we're on administration. There's no correspondence. The first report is Regional Municipality Accessibility Report. Do we have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor McDougall, second by Councillor Wu. Questions, comments, debate? Being none, I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Next item is the appointment of appointment of new members to the Durham Accessory Advisory Committee. There's a report that is there with the names. Ms. Chadwani and Mr. Williams. Motion to approve the report moved by Councillor McDougall, second by Councillor Leahy. Questions, comments, or debate? Councillor McDougall, go ahead.
I just want to say at this time, as the representative to the Accessibility Committee, I want to thank the individuals for stepping forward for such an important appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Being no further debate, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Next item is the Durham Region Anti-Racism Task Force Cohort 2 Work Plan. There's a report that's in front of us, draft, and it's from the CAO. Elaine, do you want to speak to this?
Sorry, Alison Hector Alexander is here, who's the director responsible for the task force, but this is simply the workforce in terms of community engagement, the work they'll be influencing in the broader Durham community over this term, as well as some work that they'll be supporting us with internally. And I'll ask if Alison has anything specific that she would like to highlight.
No, you pretty much covered it, Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to approve the report moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor McDougall. Any further debate? Being none, all those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Moving now on to finance. There's one correspondence. It was pulled by Councillor Collier. It's in regards to the annual investment report. A motion to receive is the recommended recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Wu, second by Councillor Leahy. Any debate? Councillor Leahy.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. So I just going through the report and then the investment returns by remaining type. So do we suspect that since a lot of us suffer in safer investments, that as the higher interest rate environment adjusts, that we would see more an increase in our investment returns? Like it speaks to that in the report on the tables talking about investment returns by remaining term year over year, but what the projections I would imagine are going to improve with this a higher rate environment.
So a couple,
Commissioner.
through the chair, thank you. A couple of observations. So certainly our performance in 2023 will be higher than 2022 because none of us had predicted, of course, what the Bank of Canada has been doing. In the longer term perspective, of course, the goal of the Bank of Canada is to bring those rates back down. So our investments in turn will eventually go down the curve on that. However, there is a very significant report that you will see on the next Finance and Admin agenda, and it could be why Mayor Collier pulled this because he's asked about it before. We will be bringing a report to you about the region transitioning to prudent investor and what that does. And of course, from Whitby's already done that, but because of the bulk of our portfolio, that then will shelter us more from the swings up and down. Then we have a more reliable way of targeting what can be brought into the base consistently. So you will see a very lengthy report with lots of fascinating investment details coming to you in October.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. So when it's just, I think it was this report in my highlights there. So it's is this where we're managing about $4 billion in money? Because we've got our budget, around 1.6, 1.7 billion plus the reserves. So is that where all that number is coming from?
So that number includes, of course, development charges, reserve funds. It includes cash required for operating. It includes all the funds for capital projects that are approved and the money is set aside. And as you know, major projects, for example, could take 3 to 4 years. So it includes all of those monies. It includes funds that we have. So we have post-employment liabilities on our financial statements. So we have some funds towards that. It includes those kinds of funds. We have, water billing deposits where customers put their deposits in. We may have those in custody for quite a lengthy period of time. So any and all sources of funds that we maybe have on reserve. We may have developer funds on hand if they've given us cash rather than a letter of credit. So it is an addition of all of those items.
Got it. Okay, no, that's helpful. So just appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Mayor Schumer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Commissioner of Finance. The August report that you had forwarded to me stated, I guess, that we anticipate, $10 million in surplus investment earnings for this year. And just following up on Councillor Leahy's questions, so of that 10 million excess, how much would be, or roughly how much could be allocated to property tax?
So through the chair, the plan for the current year, I'll say unanticipated increase in interest returns is intended to fund the purchase of 1635 Dundas. So I'm not anticipating that I'll even have enough from that. We'll still have to look to reserve funds for the differential. I think it's public information. The cost for that was 13.7, and then there's additional funds to do retrofitting. So the surplus that we're anticipating as a result of those interest earnings would be directed towards the acquisition of that facility.
Right, but if we didn't, if it wasn't earmarked for anything in particular, that surplus 10 million in investment earnings, how much would be kind of allocated or the result of property taxes? So, other words, not dedicated to reserve funds or reserves necessarily.
So we build into the budget annually investment earnings to offset tax levy already at a stable amount. As I say, challenge in prior years was it was very, very low from an actual earnings perspective. But so we already build into the budget interest revenue. And then what we did if you recall, when we did the transit multi-year plan last year, we had said that 24 and 25 will be particular challenges because the federal funding isn't coming until 2026. And we had referred to it as a highly technical term of it being lumpy. So we had smoothed that out at 2%. So for 2024 and 25, the excess interest earnings that we're anticipating, we had put towards, in that financial plan, put towards transit capital in order to try to get to that smoothing, if you will, and we're still not there, but we're working on it. So that's where that, so the base amount still goes into the budget every single year to offset tax levy increases, but the incremental earnings because of the unanticipated Bank of Canada strategies, we are now using to try to finance the capital for the transit.
Okay. I know what we're planning to do with it, but I'm just trying to get an idea of the $10 million of additional investment income that was outlined in that August report. If it wasn't earmarked for anything, how much is actually discretionary? Because some of it, as you said, has to do with reserve funds. We can't be touching that for general purposes. Some of it has to do with maybe some other funds that we can't necessarily touch. But how much of it, in theory, would be available and discretionary?
Oh, my apologies, through the chair. Thank you for clarifying. So that 10 million that's quoted as surplus is the operating fund surplus interest earnings. The reserve fund interest earnings are already allocated to those reserve funds. So that 10 million is the operating additional interest. And then because in the report dealing with 1635, the financing was at the discretion of the Commissioner of Finance, that's where I would be choosing to utilize it as a result of that discretion. But the
Okay,
entire
thank you very
10
much for
million
the-
is the operating component of that, that surplus.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a recommendation moved and seconded to accept for information. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Reports on finance. The first one is regards to loans, tile drainage loans in the municipality of Brock with 2 people. Motion to approve? Oh, sure.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not sure how you wanted to deal with the delegation that was here prior to from the hospital. So did you want a motion to refer that delegation to staff?
I think Councillor Wu might deal with it under the,
Under other business?
no, under the budget guideline.
Oh, okay.
But moving it to staff for discussion and might be a more appropriate way to deal with it in a more thoughtful time frame.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm good if Councillor Wu wants to move that under other business. Would you accept that?
Yep, sure.
Okay. Chair, I'm happy to move reports A through F, and I'd like to pull E and F.
Okay, consent agenda with items E and F moved, pulled. Mover and seconder, moved by Chair Henry, seconded by Councillor Leahy. Any other polls? Councillor Leahy.
I report B and report D.
B and D?
B and D.
Okay. If there's no other polls, we're going to deal with A and C and then go through the list. All those in favor? Opposed? That item's carried. Okay, first poll is B, update on regional commodity price hedging agreements. Councillor Leahy.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. So, I was going through the report, and again, I appreciate and support the concept in general. But what are some of the examples of where we will see this price hedging come into effect? Like, I'm thinking of materials, gas, fuel, other of those different things. Like, what other examples would we focus on price hedging agreements that would achieve us cost savings in the long term out of this new policy or adjusted policy?
Commissioner?
So through the chair, we are focused on the energy and fuels. The only change, this is a very long-winded report, there's really 2 things that are happening. The first is that we used to rate who we would, because even in these hedging agreements, we actually have partnerships with the provider, if you will, and we used to rate them simply on like a bond rating.
Okay.
Now we've broadened, because some of them are being merged with others, and there's not always that rating. So the one really policy change is that we're broadening how we would evaluate their financial status. And the second change is that some of the responsibilities I'm delegating from the Commissioner of Finance to the Director of Business Planning and Budgets. That's all that's changing. The rest is the same as we've always done. It's a very complicated report to say that, but that's all. Those are the two, essentially the two things we're changing. How we rate who we're going into partnerships with respect to this and delegating some of the responsibilities.
And then supplementary to that through the chair is that because, again, you're saying there's a lot of mergers, so are there just less options, there's less people doing that, so we don't have as many options as in the past?
So through the chair, and I stand to be corrected, I think we actually have some more options
Okay.
than we've had before, but how we selected them left us with shrinking the pool, and why would we shrink the pool?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've actually are trying to have a better opportunity to get more parties in and create even more competition and get better pricing.
Okay, and then final question was just, do we have any sense of how this has benefited us in the past? Like, do we have a material cost savings from this, from the effort that goes into this, that we can show means X number of dollars that we save?
So through the chair, some years we have definitive savings that we do encounter. Other years, it's more about avoiding cost increases.
Got it.
So it's hard to measure, but we can certainly, if you would like, Nicole, you can put together a memo. But there are years where it's very clear that we can see a cost savings. Because it is a rolling market thing, most of the time it gives us that security, number one, that we have what we require. Because in some years where the supply is low, we need to make sure that we've secured those contracts. And as I say, it's more avoiding the escalation in value. So it's a little harder to say that we didn't pay something that we would have otherwise have had to pay. But certainly we can do a bit more work on that if you'd like.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's a motion duly moved and second. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. We've dealt with C. We go to D now. Additional allocation and revision of Canada Community Building Fund programs, road rehabilitation projects. Councillor Leahy.
I don't know if it went through.
Got
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Chair. So again, speaking of trying to get more funds from other levels of government, I know that's directly what this particular fund is. So my question is around, this is just a reallocation of those funds. Like, do we not have the opportunity to continue to apply to this grant for more funding opportunities for the region?
So through the chair, this is an ongoing program. Every year in the budget, we utilize a significant portion of our annual allocation. The key here is that it expires after 5 years. So some projects, particularly through COVID, we were very challenged to get the project completed, and we don't want to lose the money, so we're shifting it to projects we know absolutely will be completed. So this is more just to not fall afoul of that 5-year limitation. But yes, this is annually in the budget. As many years out as the feds will commit to carrying it forward, we are including that in the budget.
Okay, so it's really just a housekeeping thing.
This-
So we
yes,
don't have
this
to write
is-
a check back to the feds.
No, that's
All
correct.
right, thank you.
Mayor Schumer, I saw you jump on my screen here. Do you have a question? I guess not. Okay, I'm going to call, it's duly moved and second. There's no further questions. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. Next item is Report E, and it's moved by Chair Henry, seconded by Councillor Leahy. And it's regards to harmonized sales tax request. Chair Henry.
Thank you, Chair Ash. At the appropriate time, I'm going to request for a recorded vote as well. Chair, as you're aware, and you're hearing in the news, municipalities across Ontario, if not across the country, are looking at different ways to raise funds. You can watch what's going on in Toronto, where they're looking to possibly raise money for an additional 1% in the sales tax. This is a way that we can, if the government was to work with us, come up with a way to offset some of the costs related to property tax costs, and some of the challenges we're having funding things that we really shouldn't be funding. Staff have done a great job on this report, and I thank them for the efforts. It's taken a long time because there's a lot of detail in this report, but I hope that committee endorses it and that council endorses it, and eventually that AMO and Marco endorse it, so that we have that voice to go to the other levels of government saying, look, we need help, and this is a way to do that. And by reinvesting that money back into our communities, it may be 10%, but I question whether it is 10%, because of the jobs that would be created and the goods that would be purchased. There's a spin-off effect to this that would also create more opportunities and more funding. It is a way to meet some of our needs, not all of the needs, and I think I just want to thank staff for the great work they've done on the report.
Councillor Leahy?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, fully support of the effort. Anything that we can do that brings in revenue on a consumption basis versus property taxes is a lot more equitable to taxpayers. It's a lot more equitable to the users and helps us keep the property tax base low. So it's fully supportive of that initiative. I think that's been on the agenda at AMO all 9 years I've attended. Doesn't matter who's in power. They all say they don't want to raise taxes, but I'm just saying, give us the powers of the City of Toronto Act. Give us access to consumption taxes. Like, this is just, we have to change the regime of funding for municipalities, because we're going to continue to have these crushing increases. So it's only through this is it successful. And you also notice that what struck me the most on the information in that report is, if you go on the table that's on page 6 to 7, you'll see between 2015 and 2022, like the Ontario sales tax in 8 years, went up 50%. Like, our property taxes, even a 5% increase over those 7 years, like, it's not a 50% increase. Like, it's going to be sustainable, better, equitable, predictable. It's just so much better for planning. So I hope that people don't just listen, but actually do some action. So fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Mayor Schumer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I do also support the report, the request, but I think maybe it would also be useful in the future when the province essentially says that they have too much money, that municipalities ought to go to them and say, well, that's fine. How about handing some our way? When the province gave up licensing revenue, that was $1 billion. And of course, then they went to the federal government asking for money for healthcare, got billions, and not much of it is flowing down to municipalities. So I fully support this idea, but I think the next time the province slashes out $1 billion or more in their revenue, saying basically they've got enough, we should remind them of, as Chair Henry has said, we should remind them of the provincial obligations that municipalities are paying for through property taxes, and it doesn't belong here, and we should carry this much further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor McDougall?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the report. Question I have is just with regards to the background information from January 17th. It says, whereas an increased municipal capital program generates offset income tax and HST revenues to upper levels of government. It talks about applying to both the provincial and the federal governments. And seeing as a lot of the difficulties that we're having stem from the federal government and federal policies, is there a reason why we're not asking for a portion of the federal sales tax as well? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Henry?
I'm quite happy to change the report to make sure that we ask both levels of government.
I'll happily make that amendment when the time comes.
Okay, well, the time is now, so I'll take that as a friendly amendment to make that request from both upper tiers of government.
Thank you.
Councillors will recall that the federal government did in fact cut GST. The Honourable Jim Flaherty cut it from 7 to 5, so it went from 15% to 13% combined tax. So there is a history of a higher HST. So it's duly moved and seconded and amended with a friendly amendment to add the federal government, and Chair Henry has asked for a recorded vote. So the vote will be open now. That motion's passed unanimously. The next item is the property tax supported budget guideline. It's moved by Chair Henry. Can I get a seconder to get it on the table? Councillor Leahy. Chair Henry.
Thank you, Chair Ash. I have an amendment.
Okay.
And the clerk can post it for us. possible. Okay, Chair, I'd like to, it's on your screens now that I'll give you the amendment as it reads. A requ-
Departments is Bill. Departments. Go ahead.
Request that staff report on the impact of limiting the tax cap to at 6.25% and 5.25% for regional departments and related policies.
Okay, seconder, seconded by Councillor Leahy. Chair Henry.
Chair, I struggle with this. I think it needs to go back to staff to look at every opportunity that we have and bring back some options for us. And I would ask that it come back realistically in November. I know there'll be a lot of work to do this, but to the finance meeting in November, so that committee can look at it again before it goes into the budget process.
For clarity, is it 6.25
And 5.
plus the police at 2.5?
Yes.
Okay. So just so people know, we're currently at 7.25 plus 2.5 for 9.75. And the amendment is to lower it to 6.25 and still have the police, their request lowered to 2.5. Debate. Oh, Chair Henry, do you want to debate your motion or?
I think the only way I could debate this would be to repeat everything I've said this
Okay,
morning.
that's fine.
So I'm not going to do that to you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Leahy, and then I have Mayor Schumer.
Yeah,
Just your first.
Yeah, just a question for clarity. So we're just, it's to move it from 9.75 to 8.75 is what we're saying. Yeah. Yeah, so 1% less than what staff recommended. Is that fair?
That's the intent of the
Okay.
amendment, correct?
And again, so the other supports, like the challenges on the DRPS piece, can we not push that any lower than what they've requested?
Well, we can give them any number we want, as the board is arm's length, and they make the determination of their ability to have adequate policing. And they have a mechanism to appeal the allotment given to them by regional council if they don't feel it is the appropriate level to fulfill their mandate. So, and that appeal mechanism is through the, Jason, what's the, help me with the police, I forget what the fitting is. Jason?
The chief does have the,
You're on now. You're next door.
the chief does have the option to appeal a decision of council to determine whether or not the allocation from a municipal council is suitable to meet the requirements of the policing obligations in the community. So it can be appealed.
And the tribunal that deals with that is called what? That's what I was,
Yeah, and you can be excused for that because it eludes me as well.
Okay.
But it's in the Attorney General's office. Ultimately, it's a ministerial decision.
okay. Back to you, Councillor.
So, and I just ask, if we're asking staff to do, look at a 10% drop and to minimize their impact, can we not go back to them and ask for another look at that? Like they wanted 9, they come back with 8.26. Like we're trying to limit our departments to 5.25. Can we not ask them to take another look and know what the impact would be if they did a 10% less, like they were asking for 15 million, to only ask for a $13.5 million increase? Is that an option?
Giving direction is always an option. It has to go again through council. Commissioner?
If I may, through the chair, perhaps it could be worded similar to what Chair Henry has worded here, where the police be requested to provide a scenario at, say, 2% as well as 2.5% for council consideration. perhaps that at least it expresses that message that this council committee would like to see what it would mean to have less.
Yeah, like options are helpful. I'm always up for options. So it's I really, can I ask for, is that an amendment or do I need another motion on that or?
No, we would have to make an amendment to the request to the police service. So just for clarity, the regional staff's position has gone back to the administration of the police, and they have not given, regional staff have not given them their full request. I'm not sure if it's gone to the board yet. So there's one cut already.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that's not something that we can have an ongoing dialogue about.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I get looking for the options because it's, we're looking at the, highest increase that we've seen in 30 years, as far as I can remember. So we're just asking if we can ask all departments to take another look and provide options, what the impact would be if it was less.
Okay. I will, since you're the seconder to this motion that's on the screen, I'll have our clerk add some language as we go through the speakers list.
Yeah, sure.
In regards to policing.
Thank you.
Sir, are you done?
Yeah, and I guess, so will we see when this comes back, and maybe this is more to staff, like what are the impacts if they drop that 1%? Because it's still 8.75 is still pretty high. I appreciate the efforts to try and make it lower. Great. So we'll see what the impacts are. Like, can we ask for impacts of even more? Or is it just, is it too hard to do an extra 1%?
If I may, through the chair, this resolution already gives two options for us to work through. Without changing your path forward on major things that have been approved, anything else is not really going to be feasible. I mean, it's going to be very challenging to give you options to get to these two scenarios that the chair has put forward. I was honest, I think, in chatting with Councillor Garrett earlier, if I could have, if as a team we could have brought you something different, it was not our choice to bring you something like what you've seen today in any stretch of the imagination.
No,
So I would suggest to you that we'll be incredibly challenged to bring forward the scenarios that through this request from Chair Henry, and we will absolutely give it our all to do that. I would suggest to you anything lower is massive change in the things that this council has directed us to already engage in. Unless between now and then there's significant shift in what the province has announced. And certainly we can suggest that to you that, and I mean, I know we'll do this anyway, but you could add to the recommendation and staff report back on any change or movement with respect to provincial funding and federal funding initiatives between this report and when we report in November.
Yeah.
The goal would be perhaps through the chair that some of this advocacy and I think perhaps a gap that wasn't really acknowledged when AMO announced, it was announced at AMO, the support to the local levels, perhaps it's a gap that the new minister might consider. Who knows?
Well, they
I have no
delayed-
insights whatsoever,
No,
so
I
please
know.
don't. But we could report, you
Nobody
could add
does.
that we report back on any change or movement in provincial federal funding
So
to
what-
assess.
What the
assist.
commissioner's suggesting is these motions would get the requested increase down to 8.25. 7.25 plus 2%, sorry?
Sorry, do you mind? I'll just jump in. I think what we're saying is that we will report back in November on what the impact would be of reducing the regional divisions and related agencies allocation by 1%, which would mean a 6.25% increase, and by 2%, a 5.25% increase. I can't presuppose what we'll recommend on that report, but we will be able to articulate very clearly what the impacts are for each scenario.
Right, okay. That's, I think, what
That's fair.
the councillor wants.
Yeah, no, just really just impacts and options, like that's helpful. And if we can't do the options and the impacts are too great, at least that's an informed option. I feel more empowered if we have options. So I appreciate the options. And
Thank you.
Appreciate that's my comments for now. Support what's on the floor.
I just got a text from upstairs on the third floor. The Ontario Civilian Police Commission is the appeal body. So Mr. Hunt and I don't have to feel stupid for the rest of the day. I do have a list here. So Mayor Schumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, first of all, I want to thank staff for the report. I think we thanked them during the presentation, but I definitely want to thank them for the report. It's an uphill battle for sure. In the report, I think it's item 4.2, it states that a large part of this is the number of items received in year and approved by council. I'm never a fan of these kinds of approvals. I probably won't be much of a fan in the future, given this comment. But can you give us a rough idea of the impact of those in-year council approval, basically approving before budget?
So through the chair, we did identify some of them in the presentation, which is on, I think it was slide 6, but let me just find that. The Director of Budgets is also looking up on one of her details. So it is slide 6 where we talked about housing and homelessness is where we also reference the outreach workers at $1.5 million, the housing redevelopment office at $0.6 million. So we're looking at, and then there were a couple of other smaller ones, I want to say at about $300,000 or $400,000. So that's generally the ballpark that we're in for those. And then 1635 Dundas, the purchase was approved in year, but that presupposes that there has to be cost to operate a facility. So we're looking at about $2.5 million there, and that's certainly not for the full scale of what the community engagement will result in over time. That would be for the initial envisioned, and the CAO can correct me, 45 spots. So those would be the items in particular. So most of them are identified on slide 6.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't sure if there were maybe additional items beyond what was on the slide. So slide 6 is basically the bulk of those items.
Yes, through the chair. And then the phrasing is probably a little bit more general because it also picks up things that were approved last year that have a bearing this year. And the example of that, of course, is the Beaverton. We knew at budget time last year, and I think it was Councillor Judd that asked me the question because the RFP for that cost was just being closed within days of the budget after the budget being approved. And so that now is coming on stream as well. So it was a decision made in advance, and now the operating costs will come on stream. We typically try very hard to match those up at the same time. And that's, for example, the transit. If you're going to buy buses, you need to have the operators. You can't buy one without assuming the other. So we try to match them, but sometimes it doesn't quite line up from one budget year to the next.
Okay, thank you. It was mentioned during the presentation, probably by a few people. Chair Henry brought up the issue of non-municipal responsibilities that are paid through property taxes. I think he mentioned the core services review. I mentioned the core services review. And it does seem to be getting out of control. And I think it's been mentioned that it is having a detrimental impact on municipal finances, and we're seeing it come to a head. So can you tell me when the last time Durham Region did a core services review, if we've done one at all?
Commissioner?
So if I may, through the chair, I've just been here 5 years. I'm not sure that, certainly in my time here, I've not seen a core services review. That being said, some individual departments have undertaken efficiency reviews of either their department or components of that department, because as you know, each year the departments are challenged, as the CAO referred to go line by line and find savings. So in order to accomplish that, some of them have, over the course of time, looked at that realignment. And so finance, for example, did that when I first arrived to structure it, in my view, optimally to deliver. And I know, for example, the CAO, from a communications standpoint, has done that. So we have done, I'll say, in-year realignments from efficiency perspectives. But I couldn't tell you when, if ever, there was one done globally. As I say, the CAO and I have been here 5 years, just about, so not in our recollection.
Okay, and I know that, the region's been around for decades, so maybe if we could just confirm if we've ever done one, that would be appreciated. We've been talking a lot today with respect to the presentation and now the report, about the budgetary impact on the property taxes. And it was mentioned by Councillor Leahy, if you factor out the assessment growth where, this current document is looking at about almost 12%. But that's kind of buffered by, as you said, you've already factored in the use of reserves. And I don't know if you're going to have this number in front of you, but I would appreciate it if you could forward it to members of committee. Do we know what we're actually budgeting to spend on an incremental basis for operating and capital? So if we didn't have all those nice reserves sitting around to finance some of our operations, do we know what we're talking about here as far as an increase in regional spending? It's got to be well above 12%.
So if I may, through the chair, we certainly don't have what we would call the gross spend, which excludes the revenue side, on hand, but last year our gross spend was about, without water sewer being included, was about 206 million. Sorry, 206 million is our gross spend. Incremental increase. So we can get back to you on we tend to express this all in the tax levy impact because, of course, that's how all of our things are expressed. But we will get back to you, my apologies, we will get back to you on what that number is. Certainly our gross budget is about 2.2 billion. And if 40% is funded by property taxes, we can do the math backwards. But I'd rather give you the exact number.
No, and that would be appreciated because it is a little deceptive. When we're, talking about, yes, property taxes, which, it's important, but understanding, just how much more we are spending on a year-over-year basis. So that would be appreciated if you could do that. The region, my next question is, the region does excellent long-term planning. It's actually a good model where I'm pushing for it to be replicated in Brock. We do a lot of long-term capital forecasting. We do a long-term debt forecasting, which I think was in your presentation today. And I get the fact that long-term planning is a bit of a crystal ball issue. We're never quite sure of where some things will land. But are we doing long-term planning on a very comprehensive basis with respect to operating, with respect to capital, debt financing, reserves, and everything, to see where are the property taxes needing to be in the next, 5 years, 10 years? Because, two terms ago, Regional Council brought in a very low property tax increase. There was not a lot of yelling and screaming that, hey, the sky's going to fall if we don't go higher. Then last year, it bumped up to like 5%. I think it doubled. And we were told, yeah, you can expect this on an ongoing basis. And now we're looking at pretty much double digits with not much relief given to us for the future. Are we doing anything to get an idea about where all of these trends are going to take us? And I can't remember, it might have been Councillor Leahy that asked kind of, can we sustain this? This is, in my opinion, unsustainable. But are we doing any work like that?
So through the chair, we did last year as part of the main budget, did that projection of what that would look like. And that's where we rested in my messaging that, 5 is the new norm, if I may say it so boldly. But of course, circumstances continually change and we're at the mercy of legislative change. So we will do that again as part of this year's budget process to try to have a better insight into what we're looking at going forward. So yes, we do. It's just that we can't control external factors that cause very significant shifts to that.
Yeah, and I fully understand that, but I think we, as responsible decision makers, we have to be looking forward, because we start making all these nickel and dime decisions each year, and lo and behold, it catches up to us. when maybe if we understood the long-term implications of some of the decisions we're making, we might take a different road. Earlier today during the presentation, I think once again it was Councillor Leahy who mentioned or alluded to the need to review what we're doing, because it sometimes appears, and this is where it brought me to this question, it sometimes appears that we've got, I'm going to say, competing priorities, and you might have actually used that phrase during the presentation. You know, the region declared a climate emergency. Many municipalities did declare a climate emergency a number of years ago now. And I fully support that issue. We're seeing that play out. But yet, you know, we expand roads, and meanwhile, we're trying to push people onto transit. It seems sometimes we've got some seriously competing priorities. I'm just wondering, is staff looking at that, the trade-off? I mean, are we following, you know, what we're preaching as far as, look, if we're trying to save the planet, get that climate emergency dealt with, but yet we're advocating for wider roads, for more cars to travel on, are we really, you know, accomplishing what we're setting out to do? And meanwhile, we want to invest more in transit.
So I'll let the CAO start. I certainly have some comments to add.
Yeah. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, we absolutely struggle with that all the time. As you know, we do have a focus on transit expansion, both through the Go East extension and through our own transit authority. So we are very definitely see that as a priority in the context of the climate emergency. Our fiscal constraints have required that we do try to make decisions that impact one and not the other in necessarily the same way. And we've recently gone through that in a number of issues related to climate change. So it is a constant challenge. I'll turn it over to Nancy, and maybe she might want to add a few other things. But we are trying to balance the priorities, recognizing that we still need to build and maintain roads, but we want to do it in an environmentally sustainable way.
If I may simply add to that, part of our challenge is that we are very large geographically. So in an ideal sense of, for example, climate change, you know, if you're condensed urban, you can make more concrete decisions around roads, for example. But given the sheer magnitude and geography of the region of Durham, it means that we have to make choices. So we certainly have that objective. And then as our CAO mentioned, the fiscal constraints then also, much to the difficulty of our climate change manager, you know, you're going to see, for example, a report in October on the deep energy retrofits for the Durham Local Housing Corporation, because the magnitude of the cost to match the objectives that we have is very much a challenge, and this committee and council will be challenged in trying to deliver on those. You know, it's one of the things that, you know, underride the budget you see today. Our capital costs are higher because we are trying to factor in all of those components. In our actual final report, we do have a section on climate change as an example of our objectives, and we try to highlight exactly what we're accomplishing in the budget for that. But certainly from a guideline perspective, we're not there with having that level of detail.
Okay, it's just sometimes I think the general manager of transit must sometimes roll his eyes when he sees us with some of the items we're doing to make car travel that much easier. Last year, right at the end of the budget process, we received notification from the province that they were bumping up their funding for some of our social services programs and services. Can you just elaborate on how that's impacting the roll forward? Because just for confirmation, we received that additional funding. Was it replacing? Did we replace our essentially our portion of property taxes into those services, or we just spent that much more?
So if I may, I have a couple of things, but I am going to defer part of the question to our Director of Business Plans and Budgets with respect to news that we have for broader provincial changes. So for paramedics and health, we're starting to get some information through that's not necessarily positive. I think what you're referring to is the social services funding that came in. Literally, it was confidential, I think, when we were approving the budget because we didn't have approval from the minister to disclose. Those have been used for very particular items within that category. It has not replaced tax levy funding, simply because the requirements there are so great. We've required both what was in the tax plus that additional, and I think we have it in the report that we're anticipating maybe another 5 million more in that funding in this coming year. But I will defer to Nicole with respect to, sometimes it's good news and bad news. The province is entirely off stream with us from a budget timing perspective. And even with their March 31st year end, it's often that we don't hear until several months after their year commences what they're funding for us. So if I may, I'll have Nicole just briefly touch on our wins and losses there this year.
Thank you, Nancy. Through the chair to Mayor Schumer. So Nancy's correct. Normally, we do not receive confirmation of provincial funding until well into our fiscal year. With the exception of perhaps housing and homelessness, where there's been some guidance provided by the province on what we can expect for upcoming 2024. So as Nancy's indicated, we do anticipate additional funding under the Provincial Homelessness Prevention Program. And I'm looking here on section 11 of the report. So it speaks there to some additional provincial funding there, which has been included based on the guidance we've gotten from the province, that incremental provincial and federal funding for housing and homelessness has been incorporated into the guideline recommendations that are before you today. So we have reflected that. We've also received within the last couple of weeks confirmation on 2023 funding for paramedic services and for public health. The paramedic services was good news, and we did receive additional funding than what was planned for in the 2023 budget. The guideline before you today does contemplate, and so did our 10-year strategy for paramedic services. We projected out that the province would match our investment on a 50-50 basis. That's the funding formula for paramedics. So the guideline and 10-year forecast of that 0.53% for paramedic services does include incremental provincial investment. Perhaps not on as good a news is public health. So while funding has increased for public health for 2023, it's increased at roughly a rate of 1%. We had planned in the budget 2023 for that to increase by 2%. So we're not quite reaching what we had planned for provincial funding on public health. Maybe the only other area I would highlight is with police. So police funding for court security is come in lower in 2023 than was budgeted. So again, that has been reflected in the 2024 budget ask for police. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and just to confirm then, so the incremental spending we did or are doing in 2023 as a result of that incremental funding we received, that is more or less carrying on into 2024, but is funded, continuing to be funded, I should say, through the province?
Through you, Chair Ash, yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so well, that answers, I think, most of my questions so far. You know, quite frankly, I'm having trouble supporting this, even at the reduced amount with the amendment. I agree that Durham is a caring and compassionate community, but we also have to remember about being caring and compassionate to people trying to put the food on the table. And this is a heck of a pill we're asking people to potentially swallow. I know it is just a cap. I've never liked assigning budget caps. I like to see a budget from staff both as lean as they can do it and providing the services that we're responsible for. So I am not going to support this motion. It's not to say I don't support the idea of coming in as best we can, and I look forward to seeing what might come to us a couple of months from now. But I cannot support us coming in at this level. And I think, as staff mentioned during the presentation, perhaps there is more that is going to be reviewed with respect to efficiencies. We heard about fuel being looked at, but I would hope there's going to be more. But we also have to do, as Chair Henry mentioned, is we have to take a look at what the heck we are spending our resources on compared to what we are responsible for. And that hard conversation with the province needs to happen, but I don't hold out much hope that it's going to. But Mr. Chair, I cannot support it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a speakers list, but I want to make sure, because we've kind of gone into the report again. We have a motion, an amendment that's been duly moved and seconded in regards to asking staff to give a report with a reduced target, as well as a request for police. So I want to keep the comments to the amendment, and then we can go back to the report. So, Bruce, I have you on the list. Is it in regards to the amendment? Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. My comment builds on, it's within the report, indulge me just for a second, around the table that's in 14.2 that talks about the commitment that we've made both through previous budgets and then through adjustments that have been made during the last year. To support Chair Henry's motion for staff to come back with adjustments at the amount shown on the screen, I'm a detailed kind of guy, and I'm looking for specifics when staff comes back. Let me give you an example. If we go to transit and say that we're going to pull back on that long-term view of a 2% commitment going forward, I don't want to hear from transit that, well, we'll just have 5 fewer buses in the next year. I'm just using that as an example. I'd want to know, what does that impact mean? What does that do to our commitment regarding environmental impact? What does it mean as far as operating costs that he now has to run some diesel buses for a longer period of time? We've committed to action around homelessness that Chair Henry's been very vocal about the need for support. If we're going to pull back from that, I don't want to hear that, well, we'll delay the implementation of the new facility in Whitby. I'd want to know that we're not going to house 45 people, we're going to house 20 people. So I think it's really important that this council understands, or this committee understands, the specific impact before we turn back and talk, as we typically do, and understandably at a higher level, why is this necessary? So I'm sure, Chair Henry, that's where you're going, is you're looking for specifics that if we're going to ask for less, and I'm typically not a big increase kind of guy, we've committed to this. We're dealing with unprecedented growth that's going to continue whether we provide the services or not. We're concerned about the level of service that we're going to be able to provide existing residents, let alone the tens and hundreds of thousands of people that are going to get the benefit of coming to our region. Even if, I'll word this into a question if necessary, but I want it to be very specific on what the changes, and it sounds like a small change, it's 1% less. What exactly will those impacts be in order for me to support the motion being made by Chair Henry? Thank you.
I think the CAO and the Commissioner have spoken to that there will be options outlined and consequences to get to that total, as well as further options. So it'll be a pick and choose type thing, or a fulsome discussion on what this reduction in revenues means. So we're beyond the question period, so you're allowed to debate what you did. So. I do have two further speakers. Councillor Wu, I know you have an amendment, but I'm going to deal with your amendment after this one. Do you have questions on this this amendment? Yes. Okay. Sorry, can you put your request in again? I didn't give you the microphone. There you go.
Yeah, through the chair, and about the Durham Regional Police. And I know that and I appreciate through the Commissioner of Finance, there's been discussion through your office with the Durham Regional Police Service Finance, and there was a draft budget that was presented. And what is before us in the report is staff supporting or recommending a guideline of increase, what is it, 2.5%, which we've added. I know that just say it was a little bit more than the ask. We're not getting well, when I say we, the Durham Regional Police Services, what is requested in the motion is a 5% decrease. Now, again, we can move this forward because we do have a meeting coming up next week, so the discussion will take place. Can the Durham Regional Police come up with a scenario how we can work under the 2%? So I just wanted to make that, what the request was certainly not more than what we're asking for as far as a decrease. That's a decrease of 5%, which certainly would have a, let's say, a significant impact on moving forward. And I think it was mentioned as we are growing, and again, this 1.5 million homes by 2031, we have our share in Durham Region. And again, this is trying to work in lockstep with that growth. And I see us sort of moving back. I heard Mayor Schubert say, maybe a last term, the increases were not that great. But I think what you're seeing now, and I think we all want to, for the affordability of our residents, but it's a service we're providing. And I think a lot of this now is catch up. I'll support this motion. It doesn't hurt to see how we can find efficiencies or find cuts. But again, what I see is that the staff worked very hard, finance and all the departments, to bring this report before us. And again, I think it's been said, council will make the decision on where we go forward. Now, again, as we're looking at cuts, we'll talk about my motion later about adding to our budget. Right. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just to give some context to what we're going to be asking the police, the original proposal from the police was received, and the staff position at the region was to go back to the police and ask them to find $2.67 million in savings, or sorry, $2.67 in reduced expenditures from their ask. The additional 0.5% on the budget, overall budget, would mean an additional $4.1 million, or a reduction in their ask of $6.8 million. So that's where we're at. Councilor McDougall, is your discussion is on the amendment? All yours.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
It's your quarter. It's your quarter.
Thank you, sir. A question for the commissioner. Last year at this time, if we would have had the discussion in terms of projections, what would be the tax increase that we would have projected that we would be imposing on the residents this year?
I'm just trying to do this off the top of my head. I mean, certainly last year when we had the budget deliberations, my comment was that, as I mentioned earlier, 5 is the new norm based on what we were looking at. But that was also with a proviso, 2 provisos. The proviso that the transit 10-year forecast was not smooth. We forced it to be smoothed at a 2 from an approval perspective, but in order to accomplish the things they were going to accomplish, that wasn't going to be factored in. And then, of course, what we've not factored in is the changes in the environment since then. But we had suggested at that point that 5 was the base contemplation going forward.
So through the chair to you, basically this year we're looking at well, 9.75 or even 8.75%. Do we know how much of that, but that increase from the 5 to the 8.75 is the responsibility of Bill 23 versus the responsibility of inflation? I'm just looking towards the chair when we're looking for staying whole and cost recovery, when we're looking to the upper levels of government to say we've increased our budget this year by 4.75% due to these reasons. Certainly inflationary pressures have hit all of us, but the Bill 23 pressures and pressures due to immigration, et cetera, asylum seekers, are not borne by us as a municipality. This leads into this because certainly reducing 1% is a number, but that's not really the whole increase that we're experiencing. Does that make sense?
So, yes, so through the chair, we don't have the guideline hived off, if you will, in exactly those categories. We have tried to highlight individual standalone items, but for example, to say exactly what is just inflation versus exactly what is, I'll say, growth-related costs exclusive of Bill 23 impacts. So when we come, if council approves this amendment, when we come back, we will try to express some of that. Our hope is that, through the chair, that if some continued lobbying takes place between now and then perhaps we can have some commentary in that over and try to divide some of those things out in that report so that you can see a little bit better. So we've talked about Bill 23 as a standalone. I've said to you that our current order of magnitude is 881 million over 10 years. The tax levy piece of that is 3 3/4 of a percentage point. So we've done it on individual items in your question, but we haven't done it broad-based on major categories like that. So we can take a look at trying to express it that way.
That would be muchly appreciated. I did try and dive in through our information. I think it was report F9 from last year, and we have great projections capitally in terms of where we're going, but we don't really have that same projection, and I understand in terms of operating, but we just don't have that picture kind of moving forward to say we have a wonderful graph looking backwards at provincial sales tax, but we don't have a projection looking forwards in terms of municipal expenses. So, but thank you for that, and I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That expires my speakers list in regards to the amendment. So, so basically we have the report in its totality in this amendment. So we're only voting on the amendment because I know there's a further amendment coming. So it's duly moved and seconded by Chair Henry, seconded by Councillor Leahy, that staff be instructed to return to the committee options to get to 6.25, 5.25, and also do a request to the Durham Regional Police to provide a scenario of 2.0% to our overall tax, which is a reduction in their overall request totaling $6.8 million. I've added some commentary into the wording, but if there's no further debate, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. I don't see any recorded vote requested, so I'm going to call for a hands vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. We do have a further motion amendment, and it's from Councillor Wu and a second by Councillor McDougall, and it's regard to the presentation that we got today. I know the chair and the CA wanted it to be referred back, but the motion is in order. And it reads as follows: the requested funding be Lake Ridge, Bowmanville redevelopment and other regions community investment reapproved to an additional 17.7 million for a total of 55.2 million, subject to the execution of the funding agreement in a satisfactory form for the Commissioner of Finance that includes milestone payments, performance deliverables. Will, you write worse than me? Sorry, it's up on the screen now. I think that Councillor McDougall did second it. The Commissioner was whispering in my ear that this would require potentially a further amendment to the moratorium on further requests. So, Commissioner, could you speak to that?
So through the chair, this motion is amending item D, but item E actually has us a moratorium to 26 at the earliest. In order to accommodate this, as you, I think, recall, we put 6.2 million a year of tax levy support to this. So we would need to add a couple more years to that moratorium. So we needed to amend item E to say, which is to be, I'll gamble a bit with respect to interest earned and say 2027 at the latest, or sorry, at the earliest. But we also then would need to add in a line, this would need to be subject to future budget approvals because we're extending beyond the term of council.
Okay. Chair Henry.
This is a substantive amendment. Chair, if it would be, if you would accept it, I would like to give it, refer it back to staff. Amending all the moving pieces during a committee meeting without having all the details is very difficult. Sorry I spoke to the referral, but
That's fine. I think with our new rules, you're allowed to speak to the referral, aren't you? I think you are.
In that case, I would look for a seconder.
Okay, a referral motion's always in order. That this isn't killing it, it's giving an opportunity for staff to determine the financial impact and the corresponding impacts on the moratorium. So it's moved by Chair Henry, second by Councillor Leahy, that this item be referred back to staff for consideration and a report back to us. What time, can it come back in the November timeframe? Yeah, okay. So it'd be consideration as we get updated on the next budget. So it's duly moved in second, sorry, we do allow debate on referrals now, so. Not that I'm asking for debate, but we do allow debate. Councillor Leahy.
So, and I guess the only, and I appreciate that. I understand that we're living within the constraints of the 6.2 annual budget that we put towards these requests. But I also anticipate over the next, well, this 4 years, that we'll probably get more requests. So I know we're stating a moratorium now. How would we deal with any other potential requests in the next 4 years for anything else? Which, because there is a good chance something will come. So the outcome would be that we would have to, like, put that in a budget item to raise taxes to dedicate money to this purpose?
So through the chair, just as a note for those of you that may not have seen, Health and Social Services Community Care Durham came last week. So we have a referral there to staff. In theory, they've squeezed under this approval if, depending on how this committee ultimately decides to address that. But placing the moratorium means that there will be no more dedicated funding allotted to hospitals or post-secondary institutions. That entire program would sit on hold until we get back to, I'll say, a positive position where that 6.2 that we're collecting is actually in the bank as opposed to promised to somebody. Mm-hmm. That's the intent of the moratorium. So you're quite correct. It would mean that as anybody approached, we would be advising them that that the region of Durham currently has no program for that until such and such a date, depending on, as I say, how we refer back. And I'll refer to our CAO to comment.
Just to add also, I think an important part of that during the moratorium is a review of the policy in the context of today's discussion in terms of what is genuinely intended to be on the property tax base versus other methods of taxation. So we will have to consider policy elements and alignment of responsibilities between the three orders of government as part of that review.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that's fair. Just like if other hospitals or anything else come up that are important, like we're gonna have to deal with that as it comes up on the property tax side. So I appreciate the insight. So we'll deal with it as it comes, but and support the moratorium as of today. Thank you.
I turned myself off. So, the motion to refer is in order, and it would be refer Part D as amended, as well as the commissioners asked that Part E also be referred. So, because a change to one might mean a change to the other, and they'll report back to us when they come back to us in November with more detailed costings in regards to the budget. So, Councillor Wu.
Yeah, and through the chair and to the Commissioner of Finance, now having the moratorium and understanding, I think when this program was first put into place, Durham College, UIT, the hospitals, hospices were added in there, and certainly community benefits, and much appreciated, but certainly a drain. And I appreciate, this being given consideration, and I think, and I appreciate Councilor Leahy mentioning too, in order to make this happen, do we need, specifically now we're talking about Lakeridge Health, Bowmanville 2027. I think the idea is that at least it's put in the queue. Now, having said that, what other projects, how many, without maybe naming them, are also in the queue, or is this the first one?
So I'm going to say, firstly, with great respect, and as well with great recognition of how critical the hospital system is to all of the deliveries of things and the things we care about in Durham, this conversation is exactly a challenge with respect to why we're at 975. I say that with great respect because it is very challenging to look at what needs to be done in the community. And as I referenced in my presentation, this group is the last people standing often to try to solve that. So my apologies if I take too much liberty there, but with great respect, that's why we're challenged, and it's for fabulous reasons and very critical reasons. So we will, our moratorium, right now we do have, most of the people that have been in the queue have been addressed. Community Care Durham came last week. Grandview has been in. They did get approval up to their last capital fund, and so hopefully nothing else comes there. The hospices have come in. We did do an increase to them, matching their inflated costs at the time. I know the Clarington Hospice is trailing behind moving forward than the Whitby, more than the Whitby one. I don't know what that may ultimately result, or whether, again, the moratorium would mean that what they have is what they have, and they have to figure out other ways to accomplish that. I have not recently heard from Durham College or UIT, but I do believe that they consistently factor us into their capital forecasting. So they may not have come to us yet on either side, but I do believe when they're looking at their capital forecasting, they consistently factor us in. And Lakeridge Health, they have presented to the CIO and I a number of times over the years their 10-year plan for all their other facilities. So that's why I started off by apologizing for being so bold, but it is a challenge because what other levels are not funding, they are coming to this table for us to rescue their projects, and they're incredibly needed projects. But we can't win when we're trying to then resolve this. So I don't have another brand new ask other than Community Care Durham, but I do know that post-secondaries factor us greatly, and I do know that we have a lot of ones that we have given them the funds, but they've not opened their door yet. So there is that uncertainty as to whether they've made it through all of their milestones.
So just follow, sorry.
I was just gonna say
Sorry
thank
to
you for
cut
that.
you up,
Yeah.
cut you off, Willie. I just want to clarify, because I think it's the question you're going to pose. If we approve the 17.7, which we referred back to you, that's the intent of this motion, is for you to consider it. And the moratorium would go a year or two later, but would include this request, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, refer motion is in order for the added monies on Part D as well as Part E, because it impacts the moratorium if there's a change to the core funding. So it's duly moved and seconded to refer back to staff with returning to us, I think, in November. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That item is carried. We do have a confidential report and, oh, we have to, sorry, my apologies. There is a main motion that we have to deal with, which is the report itself. Mayor Schumer.
Could I call for a recorded vote, please?
Absolutely. So the main motion is before us. It's been amended in regards to the community benefit, and it's been amended to instruct staff to come back with alternatives, and it's been amended to request the Durham Regional Police lower their request. So it's duly moved and seconded. I'm going to call, if there's no further debate, I'm going to call for a recorded vote. The recorded vote is open. I didn't see that. 6-1. Okay. The motion does carry. As amended, as amended. There's no advisory committee. There is confidential matters. And is Kelly still on the line? Okay, Ms. McDermott from Legal Services is on the call. Is there a need to go in camera? Moved by Chair Henry. Approval or receipt? Is it a report or, I don't have it in front of me. Okay, the motion to approve the recommendations in the in-camera report under separate covers. Moved by Chair Henry, seconded by Councillor Leahy. Debate. Being none. All those in favor? Opposed? That item's carried. Any other business? Being none, next date is the day after Turkey Day, Tuesday, October the 10th. Motion to adjourn would be in order. Moved by Councillor Leahy, second by Councillor McDougall. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you all. It's been quite a day.